Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurulé. And just to remind the audience, this is the second or third, I'm sorry, in a three-part episode series. In the first one, we talked about a couple weeks ago our framework, our flywheel of life, and the five areas of life that we kind of anchor all our content around. And then last episode was Jim interviewing me, using the wheel to take me around and get my viewpoint on all those areas of life, how I see them. And today I'm gonna interview Jim in the same fashion, which will round out. Um, and I think we're talking about telling our origin story in the next one, but we reserve the right to change our minds about that. Anyway, the five areas in the framework. Basically, for anyone who hasn't heard them before, we believe, Jim and I feel strongly, and we've kind of proven this over time, that every area of our life is interconnected. One area becomes more productive, it positively impacts the other four, and vice versa. So, looking forward to hearing Jim tell some stories around the wheel, and we had a real good, vibrant pregame. So, Jim, you had asked me to start off with worldview, but before I do, anything you want to add before we get going?
Yeah, like you said, Mark, this is part of our three-part series. We did your origin story last week, and then we talked about the framework. And this, yeah, excited about 2026 and how we can, really bring this to the world in a different way. And one thing that keeps the reoccurring theme is alignment and connectivity. And it seems like that just always plays out no matter what we're talking about. And then the Imperfect Men's Club. We'll talk more about how we came up with the name, but our tagline is "The imperfection is the perfection,"
Hmm.
and really just embracing that in every part of our life. It's exciting. It's good stuff. So
Yeah, and I think that uh, before I forget, just to mention, in support of all this, we're having a new website published with some new content and some other kind of cool bells and whistles. And Jim and I are putting together our independent consulting services offerings to help any men or women for that matter that want to reach out after kind of taking a journey, listening to the podcast a little bit, maybe subscribing to our LinkedIn newsletter and any other content that comes out. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. We're expected to have that out there in the world soon in support of this. Let everybody know what we're doing. So, so yeah, worldview. If just to kind of recap for newer people, I suppose this big picture, a big circle with a bunch of concentric rings that fan out from the middle of the circle like a stone you drop in a pond. And in the middle of this circle is the self. And Jim has, over the course of many months, organized over 40 self hyphen. And what I mean by that is self awareness, self reflection, and so on. And everything we do seems to start with self awareness. You're either aware of these things or maybe not yet. And so you start with the self and then you go around the wheel. And the first one today is going to be worldview. And what we mean by worldview is kind of your ideological outlook on life. Are you conservative or liberal? Jim likes the red team and the blue team. And that we get these things, our politics form as we grow up and based on circumstances and environment and things like culture. And then from our childhood, where we're raised, by whom we were raised, and things like that. And we end up with this way that we look at the world, and we all have one, and there are gradations of it. But I'm interested to hear about your worldview, Jim.
yeah, I think it's a great one to start with. But as we know, it doesn't matter; they're interchangeable. But just as Mark said, that it's the high level overview. It's worldview. It's our relationship with the world. The next one is relationships, our relationships with others, the relationship with money, our relationship with our life's work, and relationships with ourselves, the well being. So we'll cover all those. And I like starting off with the worldview because it starts off with these I call categories and subcategories, and then subcategories. And in the category of worldview, we start off with our guide me through this, Mark, so I don't get off topic here. But
Well, so
start off with
basic,
the different categories, and I'll answer the questions in a
yeah,
more
no,
systematic way. So
it's all good. I think that, in the wheel, you go out into these five areas. So they
yeah,
circle around the first lens of the wheel. And then
right. Yeah,
when
it's based on radiant thinking, where it starts in the
radiant
middle
thinking,
and it radiates out into these
yeah,
five
yeah.
areas of our life. Yeah,
And
yeah,
in the worldview, we separated that into two categories. One
yeah.
is kind of your ideology, your politics,
Hmm.
and your childhood. That's
Yeah,
where these things come from. The way you see the world is the way you see the world politically, for instance, and the way that you see the world because that's how you came up as a child through the world.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, as we said, the childhood is your starting point. I often refer to life in increments of 5 and 10, so 0 to 5. I was born in the San Francisco Bay Area, Oakland, California. Um, and yeah, obviously your life evolves in the different stages, and that has a lot to do with your neighborhood and your heritage, which is these are all subcategories of that. So I had a good childhood. I was middle class, but definitely had enough that with four brothers and sisters, or a total of four, a lot going on in the house. I was in the middle, and it was we've talked about that. The relationship with my father was good, and my mother. However, early on, I realized that my brain was functioning different than others, and so there were some challenging moments in my around 10 years old. I remember that being I was different, for good or for bad. And again, what I like about this show, we can laugh at ourselves, later on. But yeah, as far as the background, I was raised Catholic. Not that we were practicing Catholics at all, but that was the heritage. And my mother, my grandmother's side had a huge influence on me as Swiss Italian, and my other grandparents, a lot of different things, like a lot of people, American first, and I'd say more on the Latino side, they spoke Spanish, so that was yeah, it was an interesting combination. And yeah, that's that. I think about my childhood. All in all, it was good. It was also that time I've mentioned this before about the influence to neighborhood. It was a physical time, meaning that you settled your differences physically. So fighting was pretty normal. If you had an altercation, that started off, 5 years old all the way up. And I say that with not as a negative, as a positive, because you learn to sort things out. What's that Mike Tyson quote? Everybody's has an idea until they get punched in the face. You learn that
Yes,
early on. Yeah,
yeah, it's a good lesson.
yeah,
I think you get roughed up early. You're more prepared for life. That's a long conversation, and a lot of people
yeah,
would disagree with us on that, but I'm pretty firm on that one too. But yeah, the other thing,
yeah.
Jim, not to blow past them, and you can bring them into the other categories if you want, but the neurodivergent part of your life, the dyslexic, dysgraphic, that's the way your mind thinks differently, and that shaped you as a child. And you've got some good stories. Like I said, bring them in anytime you want. But the other thing is, you got into sports pretty young too, and that shaped you too.
Yeah, it helped a lot. I didn't do swimming or baseball or basketball and that stuff. It's just whatever sports the schools had. But yeah, there's no question. I learned early on that this different brain that is functioning different, also not realizing it, allowed me to see things, especially when it came to sports. I could see plays develop before they would happen. So there were some real gifts to that. It was also very difficult in the classroom, but and then even also leadership. I was always like the captain, or always in a some kind of a leader position, whether
Hmm.
I was no matter what grade I was in. So that definitely helped offset the struggles that I had in the classroom. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how we're so similar and so different at the same time, and that comes out whenever we talk. Um, Moving on to the next category, you brought up your some of your heritage. Relationships is the next category, and we split that one very easily between men and women, and we believe that men and women are very different, and we like to celebrate those differences. But and within the category of men and women, there are also, family members and friends, and there's probably colleagues in there as well. So talk about your interest in that whole relationship category, Jim.
Yeah, again, that's what's so great about this framework. You appreciate it more and more every more times you talk about it. But even just to touch on the worldview, the relationship, the way we see the world, whether that's I refer to the red team and the blue team, and obviously conservative, liberal, whatever they call it, it definitely plays out over time. And we'll talk about that more in other sections. But yeah, the relationship, when we came up with this, we specifically separated men from women, and that was for a reason, because the relationship with our mothers, our grandmothers, our sisters, and even later on, girlfriends and wives and ex-wives and all that, all have affect our life. It was a very different relationship, especially in those early years and and those interactions. So I've learned again, I can smile about it now. It wasn't funny, but even having teachers ask me to read out loud in front of the classroom, or had really negative experiences early on in my life with teachers, particularly women in position, because they were asking me to do something I wasn't capable of doing it.
Hmm.
So I talk about self-awareness. Those are some areas that were playing out in a negative way later on in life that I had to better understand. I also had some great teachers and some really loved by my mother, grandparents. So that also plays out as well. But in terms of your father, yeah, there's no question in the first 10 years of your life, the interactions with your father and the disciplines that you learn are directly related to the relationship with the father. Fortunately, I had a good father. We weren't super close. We were very different, but he kept things simple. And one thing he always said, I think I've mentioned it before, um, is that there's no shame in work. So an amazing work ethic, and that's served me well. So
Yeah, that's a good thing to inherit from your dad.
yeah.
So the one thing I want to say, I said it when you interviewed me, because I think it deserves attention, is the difference between men and women in this relationship
Hmm.
category. It's there, we should be celebrating those differences. We used to, and now we're pushing this kind of sameness that I think mostly what it does is confuse all of us. So
Yeah.
anyway, I just wanted to get that in. I don't know if you
Yeah,
have an opinion
and
on that.
like this, like I said, let's talk about this just for a moment, Mark, because I think it's super important. We talk about embracing the differences. Something's happened for good or for bad over the last few 20, 30, 40 years, whatever it was, about um, men and women either competing or being equal. Well, we're not equal, and we're intended to be equal. But the masculinity and femininity is a super important part of who we are as human beings. So I like to look at that as a dance, not as a competition. And
Mhm.
also, even the sexual energy, the intimacy, all those different things as part of as humans who we are. And back to self-awareness, embracing that so that you don't have conflict. And that's emotional maturity, and that takes a lot of deep thinking to get to a point where you can be better with your relationships, because as we get through the framework, if that's not going well, I think more than anybody, right? If that marriage is not right, it's going to affect these other parts of your life, and eventually they'll
Oh
show
man,
up.
that's a
So
fucking understatement.
yeah. So
So, yeah, no, I think that we're always going to be talking about relationships in probably
yeah.
every episode because it's such a major part of our lives. But
Yeah, and to be better husbands, boyfriends, whatever you are, be better at it. And I think that's what this podcast is all about, is talking
mhm,
about these things that guys normally don't talk about. How
yeah,
could you be a better partner? How can you be better, live a higher quality life, be a better person, have empathy in that. So it's like I said, I really like the way this has evolved over the years, and particularly when you share your story about the mistakes you've made, or even things you look back on. and then
Yeah.
focus on the positive. Yeah.
Yeah, I tell people all the time in my coaching, I think you got to start out with your story, man. You got to be able to tell your story, and surprisingly, most people can't. But
Yeah.
we can dig into that in
Or
another
just
episode.
just be aware of how those early relationships, say the relationships with past girlfriends or wives, how they're going to play out in every part of your life if you don't take the time to become self-aware and interrupt those thoughts and correct those to live your best self, to
Yeah,
live a
that's why we keep going back to self-awareness.
yeah, and
But
self-confidence. Another one always comes in. You want to, go through what you've been through. We've all been through that, but you want to reduce your self-confidence, have conflict with your relationships, your romantic relationships particularly, or
yeah,
your daughter or your sister or your mother. Yeah. Yeah, you're not gonna live your best life if you haven't figured those out, and you'll repeat
yeah.
them if you don't. So
Well, I think it's a lifelong learning experience. I think if you strive to get better a little bit every day, I think that's the best we can do. Everything else is kind of outside of our control. It seems. Speaking of which, the third category is money, and this is an interesting one for me. I think it's interesting for everybody. And what Jim and I did in developing the wheel is we went out one level on money to basically abundance or scarcity. You either have an abundant mindset with money or yours is a scarce mindset. And if you have an abundant mindset, the next level out, you are more likely to be optimistic and generous. And if you have a scarce mindset, you're more likely to be pessimistic or fearful. And
mhm.
and those are absolute truths in my experience. What about you, Jim?
Well, yeah, this was something when we created the framework, we last minute on the 11th hour threw this in, and it's interesting because every time I have this conversation with somebody, everybody says, "Well, that's the most important one," and of course it changes all the time. And then you bring up the other category, and they say, "No, that's the most important one." But money is a relationship, and typically that has a lot to do with your childhood, your heritage, whatever it is. And yeah, we create these two categories because you're either abundant, meaning that you don't worry about it, it'll come, you'll make more, or it's scarcity because you're fearful that it's not going to happen. But our relationship with money has a lot to do with the decisions we make in life. It has a huge impact on our profession, our relationships with our mental health, our physical health. Money is a relationship, and often people don't take the time to understand how much it affects it and the triggers and all the emotions that come from our relationship with money. It's again something that growing up at the time and the place, and even like you, my parents were born during the Depression, so they didn't have a lot of money, and so money was always limited. And also both of my parents had uh, say government. My mom was a nurse, an RN. My father was a electronic technician. So there was a limited amount of money. And so when you have a limited amount of money and you have that many children, you either have to go out and make your own, or you have to, there's scarcity there. But then as I got older and I realized, hey, I can make my own money. I think I started working at 14. Um, then or even businesses making things, mowing lawns, things like that. Um, you feel like you're more in control of it. So yeah, money's something that a lot of
Well,
people.
I think it's also it's not necessarily linear and it's not necessarily some place you have to get stuck. It's like we were upper middle class, I suppose, middle class for sure. My dad made good money, came from nothing, as did my mother, but yeah, and then I made a shitload of money and then lost it all. So I think that money can be a roller coaster too.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
doesn't have to
just
be
to add to what
linear.
you're saying, Mark, relationships, particularly, well, marriages end for two reasons. And the two main reasons, many reasons, but the two main reasons is sex and money.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, I've heard that.
yeah, it has the most, whether you had some or not, it almost doesn't matter. It's the stress, it's the disagreements, it's the fighting over the money.
Yeah,
And
and I think that's one of the reasons that this podcast is so fun. It's because it's like I also think you could take that another level deeper and say, this is why my relationship failed for a lot of reasons, but certainly one of them was we stopped talking about the hard stuff, you
yeah,
know, and it's disagreeing on something is one thing, but refusing to speak about it is there's no hope in that. So,
Yeah.
but money's definitely, that was definitely in her mind the main reason. And in my mind, I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and you've alluded to a few different things regarding your profession, but that's the next your life's work. It's a really interesting arc, and maybe you can
Uh-huh.
tell it, perhaps
Yeah,
not
but before
its
before we get to
entirety.
that, I'll come back to that. But yeah, we also have well-being, right? And the well-being is financial, could be financial well-being. That definitely is, but also the well-being of the relationship with ourself in terms of our mental well-being
Mhm.
and our physical well-being. So, fortunately, on the physical well-being, as you know, I played rugby. Well, in high school, I played 3 years of varsity, and then after I graduated, tried to play football, but had a pretty serious car accident. Went through a windshield, stuck my head through a windshield, and that pretty much ruled out football for me. And not that I was going to be in the pros, but every 19-year-old kid thinks he's going to be. But as a result, I started playing rugby, and that had a huge impact on my life. I ended up playing, close to 20 seasons, but 15 straight with 5 league championships and 2 national championships. One as the president of the club, and the other one as the captain, and just had a huge impact on my life and really saved my life. And without it, I think it would have been very different. But I mention that because that's what's kept me also my well-being and my physical shape. um, it was directly related to just that level. And it was towards the end, and we were at the highest level, Division 1. So the intensity and just the conditioning, it, helped me a tremendous amount in all parts of my life. But I just continue to kind of train, even though I haven't played in decades. I still train like I'm going to play on Saturday, and
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's cool. I think we both have consciousness about our physical and mental well-being. It's actually how we met, I suppose, is at the intersection of your physical and mental well-being. As I recall, the number of concussions that you speculated you might have had began to impact your mental well-being, and you went on a search
Yeah,
to.
well, I'm glad you mentioned that because you're right. After that many football games, rugby games, fights. I was struggling. That's how we met. This is back to the next part of well-being, right? Our mental health is really important, especially cognitive. And I was struggling with some cognitive issues that I'd never really dealt with, and it's hard to know, whether they were directly related to these concussions. But when we first met, that's why I went to Florida to get a spec scan and try to work through some of this. This is over 5 years ago now. Right around COVID or after COVID. And I remember the doctors telling me that there was something wrong. Obviously I wasn't feeling so good, and also for the first time in my life started experiencing even some depression, which is not uncommon, I think, as we get older, right? But
No, no, and the rates of that stuff seem to be rising pretty rapidly, which again, a
yeah,
whole nother
yeah.
topic, but very important.
Yeah. So they were, I did a bunch of testing, and they, at least I say the doctors, the 3 or 4 of them that were all not working together, really thought that this concussion was the reason. Because at that time, and still to this day, that's the NFL concussion protocol,
Mhm.
and that's the baseline of what they decide. So they did the spec scan. You helped me actually get that done, and they started looking at my brain for the first time and saying, "Hey, what's going on?" It's really hard to know, really, because there's not much you can do to the human brain. There's we know so little about it. But the final conclusion was I ended up doing like 40 hyperbaric treatments, and that to reprogram the neurotransmitters in my brain, basically, because to feel better. It was a protocol actually Joe Namath was doing around that time,
Uh-huh.
and so that opened up the neural pathways in my brain. Supposedly, it doesn't matter. It was really more a decision I made that, and it turns out the human brain is just an amazing part of our body in terms of how it works, and ultimately, you know, reprogram some of the way the brain thinks in order to deal with some of this. A lot of it, I think, I was used to doing anyway because I had to, and it was just the way I was born. But
Mhm.
yeah, I think the conditioning of, whether it's working out every day, eating well, running, all those different things, meditation, on you do that, breathing, that all is going to affect our well-being, and our physical health and our mental health is a super important part about our ability to function every single day in these other areas. So it's we keep going back to the wheel, but the wheel is designed, the connectivity in relationship to the alignment and the connectivity. It's a machine, and it's happening. So yeah, as we both know, if you're not right physically, it's going to affect your mental. It'll affect all the other areas of your life.
I think to punctuate the that category and end it and move on to the last one, I think one of the things that pops into my head is that the self-awareness that you had by going, I'm going to do something about this. Step one,
Mhm.
I'm not giving up, right? That's a big deal for men. That's a big step that a lot of men don't take. But maybe even more importantly, I suppose not, because you can't get to the second one if you don't take the first one. But the second one would be, this is within my control. I'm not leaving this up to the world. I'm going to go look and find solutions so I can control my own well-being. And I
Mhm.
think I bump into a lot of guys that don't know that that's true. They don't
Mhm.
believe they give up, or they let themselves go, or they listen to a more traditional doctor who might say, take this pill and the pain will go away, but the problem won't. And I know too many guys eating too many pills. You probably do too.
Yeah, Mark, we come up with this word agency. It's
Mhm.
really becoming to have a whole new meaning, especially with AI, but it's self-agency, right? That's what self-agency is. So, as you mentioned, I think I have over 40 and they're growing. Self hyphen and self-agency is one of those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Self-responsibility, self-discipline. It just keeps going and going. It always comes back to the self. And
Yeah.
remember you holding your hand up and
Yeah.
describing the 5 areas and then pointing to the center of your hand and said, yeah, just look at that. That's the self. So when things aren't going well, you look at the center of your palm and see a big S there and say, that's myself. What am I doing? How can this affect these other 5 areas of my life,
Yeah.
which happens to be your 5 fingers?
Yeah.
So the,
And
the
I
visual of
think,
that, I still use it every day. Yeah.
yeah, I think both of us have had a significant amount of success in helping other people. And in my experience, it always begins with this idea of self-agency, that I
Yeah.
can do something about this. I'm not going to let the world be about what happens to me. I'm going to let it be about how I respond to what happens to me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's really at the core of what we believe. So
Yeah.
let's wrap it up with your career arc, your life's work. Tell us a little bit about that. You've mentioned a little bit about it here and there.
Yeah, we recently changed the name of this, but or modified. I don't know if we changed it right. What's our new we relabeled this because we wanted to expand it. We used to call it our profession, our career. And
Hmm.
as a man, that's our self-identity. That's a super important part of us. But we made a slight modification to it, and I think it reflects the world better today. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and then I'll get into my story. But
Yeah, well,
we
I think the life's work, again, I think we started with career, we changed it to profession, and then we
yeah.
went and recently made it life's work. And
Hmm.
you had asked what I thought about that just a couple of weeks ago, and I
Hmm.
said that sounds great, because we do get tied up in our career, and we often, some of us find that our career is how we pay the bills, and our passion is something else that we do. Some guys
Hmm.
go hiking, some guys, run triathlons,
Hmm.
some guys, we choose. Profession and passion don't have to be the same thing.
Hmm.
But what we did and so life's work makes that a little more encompassing, I think. And we basically said that you can work for someone else or you can work for yourself. That's the next rung out. So, and you and I have been entrepreneurs most of our lives. I think both of us cut our teeth working for somebody else for a while and then started our own thing.
Yep.
So tell us about your journey.
Yeah, but just also to touch on what you said, and again, this is not a judgment at all, but if your life's work was, say, uh, for a government agency, even a policeman, a fireman, whatever it was, that's going to be very different than your life and my life, right? As
Hmm.
entrepreneurs, or if you work for a corporation and you've been part of that corporate world, uh, it's a very different experience
Hmm.
than being what we are, which we created that other spoke for the entrepreneur, which is what I did. I graduated after high school. I had to support myself. It was really that simple, right? It wasn't necessarily by choice, but after I dropped out of junior college. I went on later, but I yeah, my dad made it really clear, you can stay in this house as long as you're in school. And the next morning, that I told him I wasn't going to continue to go to junior college, he handed me a PG&E bill in the hallway on the way to work and said, "Pay it. PG&E is our electric." And I said, "That's a lot of money." It's like $400. And he said, I said, "Dad, I can get an apartment for that amount of money." And he looked at me and says, "You're right." And so I, at that point, was determined to prove him wrong, and became a cabinet maker to support myself. And, uh, and I went through an apprenticeship. So I was after 5 years, a journeyman level cabinet maker. And one, it was a good job, it was a great experience. I was pretty good at it. I don't think I was great at it, but it helped me support myself. It also, um, I continued to go to junior college at night, which was difficult. Um, but it also, I learned as dyslexic, you learn by seeing things, not by books, right? Reading and writing is very difficult. So that's how I was able to learn how to make cabinets. And then from there, I wanted to move from selling cabinets or making cabinets to selling cabinets. And that's when I got into sales, and did very well. It was business development. Ultimately, worked for a few companies and then opened up my own agency. And by the time it was all done and over, after a few decades, sold well over $500 million in cabinets and set up distribution, business development, stuff like that. But
Hmm.
I also at that time started seeing opportunities with the amount of product being sold as an inventor, because that's what I focus on mainly now, my intellectual property. I My first patent was for installing cabinets, and it also speaks to my brain as a dyslexic or neurodivergent, whatever you want to call it. I'm processing images, thousands of images or hundreds of images per second, when the average person's could be 10 or 20. So my mind's working very fast. It also can sees in 3 dimensions. I see depth. I see the big picture. That's just natural. That's why it's so difficult to write, because I'm jumping ahead. But my first patent was a three-way clamp that aligned the cabinets and screwed them together all at the same time. And I licensed that, and then that, to this day, is still the number one selling product in its category. And so I was the sole inventor of that. I licensed it, and then went on to do many other patents. But that was a big part of my life, was taking this knowledge I had of in the field of learning things and seeing things, but then
Hmm.
also having this sales, business development experience to bring those to market or to invent those and that. So that's my primary work. And then fortunately, over time, I was in a position where I didn't have to do that. I could pick and choose my projects, which is what I do now. And it's I do a lot for the industry, because I realized early on, if you don't have those relationships and all that, everything I do is related to the kitchen and bath industry. So I have a role with the National Kitchen and Bath Association, a membership chair. I do speaking, I do business development, and then now I'm building a AI exchange for the industry to um, to take the existing kitchens, and it's a huge industry of kitchen renovation. So I've developed an AI platform that facilitates that process, and that. Yeah, I can go on and on, but I think that what I've learned is, like a lot of things in life, what doesn't break you makes you. And it's not what happens to your life, it's how do you respond to what happens to you. So even though things have not always been easy, I've been fortunate enough to take the little bit of skills I had and built on those. Same with my my rugby days. We weren't the best team, but we worked harder, and it was really about developing a team and a group of people that work together. I also believe life is a lot to do with timing. It's the right people at the right place, and that's why I value our relationship. And that is very much part of just who I've become. I also, like I mentioned, we were laughing earlier about personality tests, but I'd like to wrap up with your thoughts about that, and even what I recently learned about my personality type, which also
Well, if I
speaks
may,
to what
Jim,
I did. Yeah.
before we do that, just real quick, you skipped right over all your philanthropic work and your nonprofit. So please mention a little bit about that.
Yeah, I'll mention that a little bit. As I said, I realized after my rugby career that if it hadn't been for my high school football coaches, my high school friends, all of that, my life would have been very different. And basically, it's statistically a fact. If you're neurodiverse, 80% of all incarcerated men, particularly young men, have some kind of neurodiversity. So
Hmm.
I realized that if it hadn't been for those coaches and that structure and that environment, my life would have been very, very different.
Hmm.
And it's the area I grew up in at the time had close to a 30% dropout rate. So if a young man starts high school in the ninth grade, only 70% will actually graduate. And what we know though, if they're involved in a sport, then that just completely flips. So I've devoted, I don't know, that's a bad choice of words, but yeah, mentoring. I helped originally at the time, really good friend of mine was the manager for the Seattle Mariners. Another former teammate and friend was the head coach for the Oakland Raiders. We all got together, raised money to redo the locker room. I think the first time, or it was the weight room, hadn't been touched since we were there, 3 decades before that. And then that evolved into getting involved in the politics and helping the superintendent at the time pass a $240 million bond measure that rebuilt all the sports facilities for the three high schools in Hayward where I grew
Wow.
up.
Yeah.
So, and then now that is turned into a mentoring program. A lot of those young men that for those first tournaments I did, um, obviously I got to know those kids and those coaches, and they're like sons now. Three of them are actually went on to kind of the same as me. They went from Hayward High to the local junior college, Laney College. They went on to college. I didn't, but they got their master's degree. Now they're back as the head coach of the my high school football team. Other one's the athletic director and assistant coach. So it's really cool to see it go full circle like that. It was actually inspired by a book I read around that time, and it was Building Young Men for Others. And the short version is it was it was about a high school football coach that played the NFL, and he said that the problem with the world today is that these young men are we need to build young men for tomorrow, and he used the game of football to capture them in their early ages. And one of the parents had walked up to them as they were practicing a preseason game, and they asked, "Hey, coach, what do you think the team's going to look like this year?" And the coach that the book was written on looked down and he looked at the, he said, "I'll tell you in 30 years."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
That's a good story.
it's a
Yeah.
great story, and
Yeah.
it's true. Those it's I think it's what inspired the framework of about our heritage, our those young years in your life and how they affect you. To see last year we had three levels at the football program. Now my old high school, we have three levels, which is a big deal, especially in that area. And there's six or seven of the coaches all are from the high school, because every year I do a camp out. We have a big camp at our home, and the players come out with their tents and everything, and we make them dinner and breakfast. And so the first one that we did 20 years ago, uh, close to 20 years, 19 years ago, that first class are the young men I just spoke of. They're not young anymore. Now they're again, um, they have two of them have their master's degree. they're the head coaches. So it's really cool to see them now going back to their own high school and helping these young men out, prepare for life. And so I've always also said what inspired me about it was change has to come from within. And what I meant
Mhm.
by that is that it can't come from the outside. It has to come from the people inside. And
Mhm.
even though things have changed a lot since I grew up, I no longer live in that area. Obviously, different races, always been that way. It's always been very diverse. It's probably less diverse now the other way, as far as um, the different nationalities. But yeah, I always felt very strongly that you have to change a culture, and you do that from within.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
No, I've done a good amount of that type of work as well.
yeah,
It's funny when I started helping my kids when they were in high school find work after graduation, I then was instructed that I needed to help all their friends do the same thing. So it's yeah, kids, young men in particular need direction. And one of the things that you say a lot, which I gravitated towards and use a lot, is we teach them in socialism and then we chuck them into capitalism and wonder why they
yeah,
they don't know what to do. So
yeah,
no,
yeah.
it's
It's
good
that, and I
stuff.
think the other one that you've heard me talk about it before too is uh, this goes back to just, you said your worldview is based on these early years in your life, the place, the time, and the culture you grew up. And the original um, mission was to prepare them for the last whistle and the last bell. And the last whistle would be their senior year of their high school football game. And once that whistle blows, they went from hero to zero. They really, the coaches and everything about them, basketball season started that second. And as a result, I just even remember, no longer you're part of this anything. You're just, and that's what, yeah, I often refer to as we prepare them for socialism, releasing them to capitalism, and then wonder why it doesn't work out, especially if
Yeah.
you're not going to college, which was my case, right? You're
Yep.
between 18 to 23-year old young man. If you don't have an education or you don't have any resources, it's no reason, no surprise that you end up, incarcerated or doing some bad stuff. So that's why you understand the rugby part was so helpful to me to fill that
Oh
in.
yeah, no, I see all kinds of different inflection points when you start telling your stories. I mean, it's just amazing, and we're all in that ball game. I mean,
Yeah,
you want to go back to a crossroads. You take a left, your life looks completely different than when you take a right.
yeah,
But that we don't have the luxury of hindsight. No, I think
yeah,
I think most of the work that we intend to do, whether it involves young men, middle-aged men, older men, whatever, is helping them with this agency that you do so well through your nonprofit, among other things.
mhm.
So,
Yeah. But something else, Mark, that you mentioned, and we talked about these different stages of our life, especially when you get into your 40s and 50s and particularly 60s. It's something that we don't talk about enough publicly about. You mentioned depression, but also suicide. Men
mhm,
are the focus for all good reasons, right? You have daughters. I have a daughter. I have a wife that was professional. So I'm not at all saying this in a negative way. There's a lot of focus on women, and and that's good. That's progress. But at the same time, you have young men and you have even men at all ages that don't feel like they can't find their place. They don't feel
mhm,
like they
mhm.
have can make the contribution that they once do. And that's the difference between a man and a woman. Our contribution, our life's work has a lot to do with of who we are and how we feel uh, needed and wanted, and that I think really was what's inspired this show, this podcast.
Yeah, it's becoming clearer and clearer every day for me that when we do deliver this offer of consulting services, coaching services, agent services, that it's really going to be around that.
Yeah,
Let's do some serious self-reflection. Let's make some conclusions based on that honest self-reflection without any judgment at all. And then
yeah,
let's identify where the opportunities might be that you just couldn't see before because you were in your own way or you didn't have any experience in that. What I do a lot is I help people just dream a little bit bigger. It's just
Mhm.
get outside of their own box. We all make our own boxes, you know?
Yeah.
All right, so I just want to conclude then by saying once again, we're coming out with a new website. We're going to be offering services, and we're not interested in selling anybody anything, but we are interested in making ourselves available. And the way that you get to me or the way that you get to Jim will be very clear. And the way that you make that decision is by listening to us a little bit on the podcast and just watching how we conduct ourselves. Because Jim's style going to resonate with certain people, and my style will resonate with others. And we're not in competition for that. We want to serve as many men as we possibly can. So thanks for
Yeah.
all the stories, Jim.
Yeah,
Anything
and
else
like
to
you said,
add?
Mark, just to touch on what you're saying, we put this out there for people to benefit from. These are just some services that people have been asking us about. It's not for everybody, right? It's not for everybody, but what is for everybody is the content or the weekly episodes that we put out and the framework and the ability to understand this. So um, I think we're going to be pretty selective of who we want to work with, which
Hmm.
is fine. But that doesn't mean at all you won't benefit from all um,
Yeah, I think that
the
one of the things that I think is relevant is to your point. If you like this, if it resonates with you, if you think that it might be helpful to you or someone that you know and love, just run over there and give us a review on the Apple platform. Give us a 5-star review if that's how you feel, because that's the easiest, without any cost to anybody other than maybe 2 minutes of your time. It resonates out to the world. The podcast gets in front of more people. And I
yeah,
think everyone in the world could use a little bit more talk about hard things and a little bit more self-reflection and some agency. I certainly benefit from that. Jim, you do it for me. I do it for you.
yep,
The idea, the concept is sound. And I think we want more people talking about this stuff.
yeah. That's why we call it the Imperfect Men's Club, right?
Yeah,
It's,
we
it's,
fit
it's
right in.
the
Thanks,
imperfection
Jim.
is perfect. All right, till next
See
week.
you.